A-hole stepfather got rid of all of my prized possessions as a child and beat the crap out of me regularly. I ended up getting all of his prized possessions and selling most of them, and when I told him, he tried to assault me in public, which resulted in criminal charges, losing his job, and his house. Now I get to see him all the time and rub his nose in it. So I was 15 when my mom decided to start dating this guy, Jason, from some sketchy dating site. I didn't like him from the moment I met him. Something about him just screamed fake. You know when you meet someone and they're just trying too hard? That was Jason. But, I figured it wouldn't last long, and whatever. I could just ignore him, right? Well, 2 months later, the guy moves in. Just like that. I didn't even have a say. My mom, Anna, didn't ask me if I was cool with it or if I had any feelings about it. Nope. One day, he was just there with his ugly plaid suitcase sitting in the living room like it owned the place. It was like he brought his bad energy with him. I tried to keep my head down and stay out of his way. Maybe he'd leave me alone if I wasn't a problem. Spoiler alert. That didn't work. About 3 weeks after he moved in, I came home from school to find that everything I cared about was gone. I'm talking about everything. My skateboards, my BMX bike, the half pipe I built myself, all my ice hockey gear. All of it. Gone. At first, I thought maybe they'd been stolen or something, but nope. Turns out Jason decided to take it all to the dump while I was at school. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to hide it. He just looked at me with this smug look and said, "I didn't want all your crap cluttering up my garage." Excuse me? His garage? The guy had been living with us for, like 5 minutes? And now everything was his? I was so angry I couldn't even talk. My mom just stood there. She didn't even back me up. I remember her saying, "Just let it go, honey. It's just stuff." Just stuff. Sure, I didn't need that skateboard or that BMX bike to survive, but it wasn't about the stuff. It was about the fact that Jason just came into my life, uninvited, and started throwing things away like I didn't matter. Anyway, I tried to suck it up. I told myself, okay, maybe that's the worst of it. Maybe this guy is just a neat freak or something. Boy, was I wrong. About 2 months after that, we were having dinner. It was some boring weeknight meal, nothing special. I got up to grab something from the fridge, and Jason snapped at me. "You didn't ask to be excused." I shrugged and said, "I didn't know I had to." Before I could even blink, the guy punches me square in the stomach. It wasn't some light slap or shove either. This was a full-on punch, like he was trying to knock the wind out of me. And it worked. I doubled over, gasping for air, completely stunned. I mean, what kind of grown man punches a 15-year-old? A total psycho, that's who. I looked over at my mom, thinking she'd say something, anything, but she just sat there. She didn't even flinch. She didn't even tell Jason to calm down. I was on my own. I could feel my whole world starting to collapse right there. My mom wasn't going to help me. She was too wrapped up in Jason to care about what he was doing to me. After that, things just got worse. It was like Jason had figured out he could do whatever he wanted, and I couldn't do a thing about it. He was obsessed with the idea that I was a lazy, worthless nerd. I had a solid collection of comics and Pokemon cards and a stack of fantasy and sci-fi books. I spent a lot of time reading and playing video games on my PS2. I guess that made me a target for him. One day, I came home to find that all of it was gone. My entire collection of comics and Pokemon cards? Gone. My PS2 and all the games? Gone. He'd tossed everything. I stormed into the kitchen ready to blow up at him, but before I could even get a word out, he gave me that same smug grin. Boys your age should be out playing football, not sitting around playing video games like some fey asterisk got nerd. I'll never forget how that made me feel. It wasn't even just about the stuff. It was about him taking away the things that made me, me. He was trying to erase who I was, and my mom, she let him. She even agreed with him half the time, saying I should be spending more time outside like normal kids. Normal. As if playing video games and reading comics made me less of a person. And the thing is, Jason wasn't some random unemployed loser. He was a middle school teacher. Yeah, he spent his days teaching kids and refereeing sports games in his free time, acting like he cared about them. But behind closed doors, he was this cruel, controlling asshole who made my life a living hell. The worst part was when he started controlling my money. My mom used to give me lunch money every week, so I could at least eat something during school. Jason decided I didn't deserve lunch money anymore because apparently I'd just spend it on gay shit like comics and video games. I was a kid. I needed to eat, and now I couldn't even afford a slice of pizza. So one day, I did what any starving 15-year-old would do. I took a few bucks from his stupid change jar. It wasn't even a lot, just enough for a slice of pizza and a soda. But of course, my twin sister Kelly, who loved causing drama, told Jason what I'd done. I thought he'd maybe yell at me, ground me or something, But nope, he called the cops. Jason actually called the police on me for taking like $3 out of his change jar. When they showed up, I was in total shock. I couldn't believe it. Jason pressed charges for larceny, over $3. The cops didn't even take it seriously, but Jason insisted. They took me down to the station, and when I came home, Jason was waiting. He didn't waste any time. The second I walked through the door, he beat the crap out of me. I remember lying in my room later that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, is this it? Is this my life now? The next morning, I ran away. I didn't even have a plan. I just grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with some clothes, and took off. I couldn't stay in that house for one more second. But of course, the cops found me and brought me back. And the first thing Jason did, he started working on my mom, trying to convince her to send me away to some military school or boot camp. Anything to get me out of the house. By the time I turned 16, I had been in and out of juvie because of that larceny charge. I spent my 16th birthday behind bars, all because Jason was determined to ruin my life. Looking back, I don't even know how I survived it all. I was trapped, stuck in this house with a guy who hated me, and a mom who didn't care enough to stop him. I felt like I had no one in my corner. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure if it would ever end. All right. So after the whole mess with Jason taking my stuff and calling the cops over a few bucks, things didn't get better. In fact, they got way worse. Jason seemed to take some kind of sick joy in making my life hell. It was like he was constantly coming up with new ways to screw with me. And the worst part? My mom, Anna, let him. She didn't even try to stop it. She acted like it wasn't happening, or worse, like it was my fault for not just doing what Jason wanted. After the police incident, Jason stopped pretending to be the nice guy in front of my mom. I mean, he didn't hit me when she was around. He wasn't that dumb. But he made sure to show me exactly where I stood in the house. If I said anything he didn't like, he'd give me this look like, you better watch it. And it wasn't just looks either. He started making these ridiculous rules, like I had to ask for permission to do anything. Get up from the table, use the bathroom, go to my room. If I didn't ask, there'd be consequences. One night, I was in my room, minding my own business, just trying to do my homework. It wasn't even that late, maybe like 9 p.m. Jason comes barging in without knocking, like he owned the place. He starts yelling at me about how I didn't do my chores that day. I explained I was working on a school project, and I'd get to them after. Apparently, that was the wrong answer. Next thing I know, he's dragging me out of my chair by the back of my shirt, yelling about how lazy I am. He slammed me into the wall so hard my shoulder cracked against it. The whole time he was telling me how I'd never amount to anything, how I was worthless. And again, where was my mom? In the living room, watching TV, acting like everything was totally fine. Afterward, when I told her what happened, she just said, "You really need to stop provoking Jason." Provoking. Right, like it was my fault he was a complete psycho. A couple weeks later, things escalated again. Jason had this thing where he hated seeing me enjoy anything. Like, if I was playing a game or reading a book, that was a problem for him. He wanted me to be working, cleaning, or doing whatever he thought was manly. So one Saturday, I was sitting in the living room playing a video game. Nothing crazy, just trying to relax. Jason comes storming in from outside, covered in sweat from working on his stupid woodworking project. He sees me, and I swear his face turns red. "Get up," he growls. I look up confused. "What?" I said, "Get up, go mow the lawn, now!" It was literally 2 p.m. and it was over 90 degrees outside. I hadn't even finished the game I was playing. So I said, "I'll do it after dinner. It's too hot right now." Big mistake. Jason lunges at me, yanks the controller out of my hands, and throws it across the room. It hits the wall and shatters into pieces. Before I can even react, he grabs me by the collar and pulls me out of the chair. This time, he's not just angry, he's furious. "Do it now, or you'll be sorry," he hisses in my face. At this point, I knew better than to argue. I grabbed the mower and went outside, feeling the heat slam into me like a wall. I spent the next 2 hours mowing the lawn under the blazing sun, drenched in sweat. By the time I finished, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. Jason didn't care. He came outside, inspected my work, and then had the nerve to point out spots I missed. He made me go back and fix them, even though I could barely see straight. When I finally went back inside, my mom was at the kitchen table, reading a magazine. She looked up, saw me covered in sweat and dirt, and said, "You know, if you just did what Jason asked the first time, this wouldn't happen." That was the moment I realized something. My mom wasn't going to help me. She wasn't on my side. No matter what Jason did, she was always going to take his side. I was completely alone. The next few months were just one long nightmare. Jason kept finding new ways to make my life miserable. He'd barge into my room at random times, demanding I do chores or accusing me of slacking off. He threw out more of my stuff, including my favorite jacket that my grandma had given me before she passed. When I confronted him about it, he just shrugged and said, "It was ugly anyway." It wasn't just physical stuff he took, though. He took away any sense of safety I had in my own home. I was constantly on edge, always waiting for the next time he'd snap. I barely slept because I was afraid he'd come into my room in the middle of the night. I started flinching anytime someone raised their voice around me, even at school. Speaking of school, things weren't much better there. I used to be a decent student, nothing special, but I got by. But with everything going on at home, my grades started slipping. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I'd sit in class just staring at the clock, counting down the minutes until I had to go back home to Jason. My teachers noticed, but none of them ever asked me what was going on. And honestly, even if they had, I wouldn't have known what to say. What could I say? My stepdad's a psychopath and my mom doesn't care? Yeah, like that would help. The only person who seemed to get it was my best friend, Ryan. He knew something was up, but I never told him the whole story. I didn't want anyone to know how bad it really was. But he could tell. One day after school, he caught up with me and asked, "Dude, are you okay? You haven't been yourself lately." I shrugged it off like I always did. "Just dealing with some stuff at home," I said. Ryan gave me this look like he didn't believe me, but he didn't push it. "Well, if you ever need to talk, you know where to find me." I nodded, but in my head I was thinking, what's the point? Talking won't change anything. Around this time, Jason's discipline got more public. He started tearing into me in front of my mom's friends, in front of the neighbors, anyone who would listen. He'd humiliate me, call me lazy and weak. One time, in front of a whole group of people, he told them I was never going to be a real man because I couldn't handle his tough love. Everyone just laughed. No one thought to ask if maybe, just maybe, Jason was going too far. My mom, of course, stood right next to him, nodding along like she agreed with every word. I think that's when I started to feel something shift in me. I was angry, so angry, but I didn't know what to do with that anger. It wasn't just about Jason anymore. It was about my mom, too. She let this happen. She let him do this to me. She wasn't just a bystander, she was part of the problem, and that realization, it made everything worse. But as much as I hated both of them, I felt trapped. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I didn't even have money for lunch most days, let alone a way to escape. So I stayed. I stayed, and I survived. Barely. So, by the time I was 16, things were bad. Like, really bad. Jason wasn't even trying to pretend like he cared about me anymore. It was all about control, about breaking me down until there was nothing left. But the thing is, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing he had me beat, even if I was starting to feel like I couldn't take it anymore. One day, things hit a new low. It was a Friday afternoon, and I'd just gotten back from school. I was exhausted because Jason had kept me up half the night with his random chores. Seriously, he'd make me mop the kitchen floor at 2 a.m. just because he felt like it. Anyway, I get home, and the first thing I notice is that something's off. The whole house feels empty. It's hard to explain, but you know when you can just tell something is wrong? Yeah, that feeling. I go into the kitchen and Jason's there, sitting at the table with this weird smirk on his face. I hated that smirk. Every time he smiled like that, I knew it meant he was about to pull something messed up. My mom wasn't home, which wasn't that unusual, but still, it felt weird. Jason was just sitting there, tapping his fingers on the table, like he was waiting for something. "Hey, Mike," he says, still smirking. "Guess what I found in your room?" Immediately my stomach dropped. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I knew it wasn't good. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, don't play dumb with me," he says, standing up and walking toward me. He gets real close, too close, like he's trying to intimidate me. "I found your stash." Now I was seriously confused. Stash? What stash? I didn't keep anything in my room besides my school stuff, and honestly, what was even left for him to take? He'd already thrown out everything I cared about. "What stash?" I ask, taking a step back, even though I didn't want to show him I was scared. "Your drugs," he says, like it's the most obvious thing in the world. "Found them hidden under your mattress." I stared at him, totally shocked. "I don't do drugs," I said, completely baffled. I wasn't that kind of kid. I never even drank or smoked. But Jason? He was standing there, acting like he'd just busted me for some major crime. "Don't lie to me," he shouts, his face turning red. He pulls out this little baggie from his pocket. It had some random pills in it. I had never seen them in my life. "Where the hell did you get that?" I asked, now more confused than anything. "That's not mine." Jason just shakes his head, like he doesn't believe a word I'm saying. "You've really done it this time," he says, pacing around the kitchen like he's working himself up. "I'm calling your mom. We're sending you away." That's when it hit me. This was his plan. He was trying to frame me. He wanted me gone, and this was how he was going to do it. I couldn't believe it. I knew Jason hated me, but this was a new level of messed up. Before I could even think of how to respond, he picks up the phone and calls my mom. I stood there, completely helpless, while he told her he'd found drugs in my room and that I'd been hiding them for months. My mom, without even asking me if it was true, believed him. Of course, she did. I should have expected it, but it still hurt like hell to hear her say, "We need to do something about him, Jason. Maybe we should look into that military school you mentioned." Military school. This guy was literally framing me so he could ship me off to military school and get rid of me for good. I lost it. I absolutely snapped. I started yelling, telling him he was lying, that the pills weren't mine, that I wasn't going anywhere. But Jason didn't care. He just stood there, grinning like he'd won. And my mom? She just stayed on the phone, agreeing with him like she always did. I knew I had to get out of there. If I stayed, he was going to ruin my life. So I did what I thought was my only option. I ran away. Again. But this time, I wasn't just running because I needed space. I was running because I couldn't live in that house anymore. I couldn't take another minute of Jason's abuse, and I couldn't handle my mom's constant betrayal. She wasn't just standing by and letting it happen. She was helping him. I grabbed my backpack, stuffed it with whatever clothes I could find, and left. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anywhere to go. I just ran. I was on the streets for a couple of days, sleeping in the park and trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. I thought about going to Ryan's house, but I didn't want to drag him into my mess. Plus, his parents were super strict, and I didn't want them to think I was a bad influence or anything. So I just wandered around, trying to stay out of sight and avoid anyone who might recognize me. But of course, I couldn't run forever. On the third day, the cops found me. They picked me up and took me straight back to Jason and my mom. When I walked in the door, Jason was sitting there with that same damn smirk on his face, like he was happy to see me get dragged back. He didn't even wait for the cops to leave before he started laying into me. "You think you can just run away and everything will be fine?" he sneered, pacing around me like a predator. "You're going to military school, Mike. There's no way out of this." I looked over at my mom, hoping she'd maybe, just this once, stand up for me. But no. She just stood there, arms crossed, nodding along with everything Jason said. She was completely on his side again. It was like I didn't even exist to her anymore. At that point, I'd had enough. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. I just stared at them, this hollow feeling settling in my chest. I didn't say a word as Jason kept yelling, telling me how much of a failure I was, how I was never going to amount to anything. It was like I'd become numb to it all. But deep down, something was changing. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I wasn't going to let him control me. And I sure as hell wasn't going to military school. I just didn't know how to stop it yet. When the police left, Jason walked over to me, got right in my face, and whispered, "This is the end for you, Mike. I'll make sure of it." That was the moment I realized I had to fight back. I didn't know how, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. Not anymore. By the time I was 18, I'd finally gotten out of that house. After running away a couple more times, my mom and Jason decided military school wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe they didn't want to pay for it, or maybe they just got sick of dealing with me. Either way, I was done. I graduated high school, packed my bags, and left as soon as I could. I didn't care where I went, as long as it wasn't under Jason's roof. At first, I didn't look back. I didn't call my mom, didn't visit, didn't even drive through the neighborhood. I was done with both of them. For a couple of years, I focused on getting my life together. I got a job, started lifting weights, and made sure I never had to rely on anyone like Jason ever again. I guess you could say I got stronger, not just physically, but mentally too. I wasn't that scared kid anymore. Jason had no power over me, at least not like he used to. But here's the thing. The past doesn't just disappear. It sits there, waiting for you, whether you want to deal with it or not. And for me, it all came rushing back when I heard my mom was sick. It started with a random call from my aunt. We weren't super close, but she was the only family member who didn't totally buy into Jason's BS. She told me my mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and she didn't have much time left. I didn't know how to feel about it. I mean, yeah, she was my mom, but after everything that had happened, part of me felt like she wasn't really my mom anymore. Jason had taken her away from me, turned her into someone I barely recognized. Still, I decided to visit. Not for her, really, but for me. I needed some kind of closure, even if I didn't know what that meant at the time. When I showed up at the house, it was like stepping into a time machine. Everything looked exactly the same. The worn-out couch, the old TV in the corner, the ugly curtains Jason had insisted on. The only thing that had changed was my mom. She looked small, frail, the kind of person who could barely stand, let alone fight back. I guess the cancer had taken its toll. Jason was there, of course, hovering over her like he was her protector or something. It made me sick just looking at him. But he didn't scare me anymore. He couldn't. I was bigger now, stronger, and I knew it. He couldn't intimidate me like he did when I was 15. My mom tried to talk, but it was mostly Jason doing the talking for her. He went on about how he'd been taking care of her, how hard it was, how much money it was costing. All I could think about was how fake it all sounded. I knew Jason didn't care about my mom. He cared about the money, about the house, about his stupid woodworking projects. He was the same manipulative jerk he'd always been. After a while, my mom pulled me aside. She was struggling to get the words out, but she told me something that surprised me. She said she was leaving Jason. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life with him, not after everything he'd done. I couldn't believe it. For years, she'd sided with him, let him control everything. But now, when she had barely any time left, she was finally standing up for herself. Turns out she had already seen a lawyer and had a separation agreement in place. Jason would get a set amount of money, and he'd have 45 days to pack his crap and leave the house. She even bought back his childhood home from the bank when he had to sell it to pay off his debts years ago. Now he'd be moving back in there. Good riddance, right? It didn't take long after that for my mom to pass away. I had mixed feelings, honestly. I was sad, sure, but there was this other part of me. This part that was just angry. Angry at her for not leaving Jason sooner. Angry at Jason for ruining so much of my childhood, and angry at myself for not doing more to stop it. But then, things started to get interesting. See, my mom had let Jason come back and get his stuff, but he was dragging his feet. He thought he could keep coming and going like he owned the place. But the separation agreement had a deadline, and he was past it. Legally, everything left in the house was mine now. So I did what any normal person would do. I sold it. All of it. Every last piece of Jason's precious junk. First up was his baseball card collection. I'd overheard him bragging about how much it was worth over the years, and I knew it would sell fast. I got about $14,000 for it. Next, I sold all his autographed sports memorabilia, around $11,000. I wasn't done yet, though. Jason was obsessed with woodworking, so I sold his equipment and a few pieces of furniture he'd made. That brought in another $6,500. But I kept some of the good stuff. He had this coin collection, and guess what? I also collect coins. I took the best pieces for myself, along with a few tools and some random odds and ends. Oh, and I also kept his mother's engagement ring, a platinum band with 3 diamonds. I figured it was worth a lot, but honestly, I kept it just because I knew it would piss him off. And man, did it piss him off. About a month later, I ran into Jason at the grocery store. He was loading his car when I walked up to him. I didn't even hesitate. I told him straight to his face that I'd sold all his stuff. His reaction? Exactly what I'd hoped for. He snapped. The guy couldn't control himself. He swung at me, but he wasn't the same Jason anymore. He was old, weak. I dodged his punches easily, and the ones that did connect barely even hurt. Meanwhile, I had my phone out, ready to call the cops. He kept swinging, kept yelling, kept losing it, even as I talked to the 911 operator. The best part? He started ramming his shopping cart into my car, thinking that would get me to back off. By the time the police showed up, he was red-faced, out of breath, and looking like an idiot. They arrested him right there in the parking lot. Assault, communicating threats, destruction of property, the works. And you know what the best part is? That wasn't the end of it. Jason lost his job at the middle school because of the charges. He lost his pension. The guy couldn't catch a break, and for once, I didn't feel bad about it. He ended up having to sell his mother's house just to pay for the expensive lawyer he'd hired, thinking he could somehow beat the charges. Spoiler alert, he didn't. So after Jason's little meltdown at the grocery store, you'd think he'd finally get the message that he couldn't mess with me anymore. But of course the guy was too stubborn, or maybe too stupid, to just let it go. I mean, he already lost everything. His job, his money, his house, but somehow he still thought he could win. That's the thing about people like Jason. They always think they're invincible, even when everything around them is falling apart. Anyway, after his arrest, word spread fast. My nephew Tyler, who was on the football team, made sure everyone at school knew that Jason had been arrested for assaulting me. It didn't take long for other parents to get wind of it, and a bunch of them started calling the school, demanding that Jason step down from his refereeing gigs. The dude was a middle school ref, for crying out loud, and now people knew he was a bully. No way he was going to keep that job. Turns out, he didn't even get the chance to step down. He was basically fired from that, too. No one wanted him near their kids anymore. Not after what he did to me. I'll admit, it felt pretty damn good to see him lose everything he'd built up. It wasn't just about the money or the stuff. It was about the fact that he no longer had power over anyone, especially me. But it gets better. Remember how I told you Jason had to sell his mom's house to pay for the lawyer he couldn't afford? Well, apparently he didn't get nearly as much for the house as he thought he would. He ended up in this crappy little trailer park on the edge of town, living in a trailer that looked like it was about to fall apart at any second. And the best part? He had to take a job as a cashier at Walmart just to make ends meet. You can imagine how much I loved that. Here was the guy who used to act like he was better than me, who thought he was smarter, tougher, whatever. And now? Now he was ringing up people's groceries at Walmart, barely making enough to pay his rent. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The first time I went to Walmart after finding out where he worked, I purposely stood in line longer than I needed to. I waited until his line was free, even though there were open registers right next to him. I wanted him to see me, to know I wasn't just going to disappear from his life. The look on his face when I stepped up to the counter was priceless. He looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die. "Hey, Jason," I said, all casual, like nothing had ever happened between us. "How's it going?" He didn't say a word. He just started scanning my groceries, his hands shaking a little. I could see the rage building up behind his eyes, but he couldn't do anything about it. Not anymore. As he scanned the last item, I made a point of handing him exact change, real slow, like I was enjoying every second of it. "Oh, wait," I said, pulling a rare coin from my pocket, one that I'd taken from his coin collection. "Didn't realize I had this. Guess I'll use my credit card instead." The way his face twisted in anger, it was almost enough to make me laugh out loud. But I kept my cool. I didn't need to say much. Just being there, making him ring up my stuff, was enough. But that wasn't the last time I saw him. Every time I needed something from Walmart, I made sure to go to that same store, wait in that same line. Every time, I'd make some little comment that I knew would dig under his skin. Like the time I bought a brand new above-ground pool for my daughter. I knew Jason loved those ratcheting wrenches he used to have, so as he scanned the pool, I said, "You know, I just sold those wrenches you loved. Figured I'd use the money to buy this pool. My daughter's gonna love it." He didn't respond, but I could tell he was fuming. He was stuck there, working a dead-end job, while I was out there living my life, doing just fine. It was the ultimate karma, and I loved every second of it. And yeah, maybe it sounds petty, but after everything Jason had put me through, I didn't care. This guy had tried to ruin my life. He'd taken my stuff, beat me, humiliated me, and even tried to send me away. He'd called the cops on me, framed me for something I didn't do, and made my teenage years a living hell. He deserved every bit of misery he was getting now. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about closure. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. Jason couldn't hurt me anymore. He couldn't take anything away from me. In fact, he was the one losing everything now, and I was the one who got to walk away, head held high. The final nail in the coffin came a few weeks later. My niece Emma, who went to the same middle school where Jason used to work, told me that he'd come back to the school to get his stuff after losing his job. Apparently, he made this huge scene in the middle of the hallway, yelling at the principal and crying about how unfair it all was. The kids who were there for summer school saw the whole thing. Emma said it was the most embarrassing thing she'd ever seen. I couldn't help but laugh when she told me. Jason had spent his entire life trying to be the big man, the one in control, and now he was nothing. Just some washed-up guy who couldn't even hold it together in front of a bunch of middle schoolers. After that, I didn't see much of Jason. I still went to Walmart from time to time, but I didn't need to rub it in anymore. I'd gotten what I wanted. Jason's life was ruined, and mine was just beginning. Stepdaughter called me a gold digger, but her dad's broke. I'm the one paying for her wedding. All right, so let me break this down for you. I, 38F, have been married to my husband, Rick, 52M, for about 4 years now. His late wife passed away about a year before we met, and we dated for 2 years before we tied the knot. So, yeah, not a super long time, but long enough to know what I signed up for. Rick's got 2 kids from his first marriage, Jess, 28F, and Blake, 26M. Now, just to clear things up, I don't call them my stepkids, because they made it real clear from day one that I wasn't their stepmom, just their dad's new wife. Fine by me, honestly. It's not like I was trying to replace their mom or anything. They're adults. They don't need a new parent. But let me tell you, things have never been easy between us. From the beginning, it was just cold. Like, no matter what I did, there was this wall between us. I tried to be polite, tried to be generous when I could, but it's like they already decided they didn't like me before I even got a chance. I get it, kind of. I went through my parents' divorce as a kid, and I remember feeling weird when my dad started seeing someone new. But this felt different. It's like they saw me as some outsider trying to take something from them. Not that I ever was, but that's how they acted. Anyway, we mostly kept things civil, though. I wasn't going to force anything, and neither were they. We all just kind of existed in this weird space where we acknowledged each other, but never really bonded. It was like living with roommates who didn't really talk to you, but you had to pretend everything was fine for the sake of the person in the middle, Rick. So fast forward a bit, and Jess gets engaged. Rick and I were excited for her, or at least I was trying to be. It's kind of hard to be genuinely pumped for someone who clearly doesn't like you, but I was doing my best. I figured this might be a chance for all of us to get a little closer. Maybe, I don't know, find some common ground in all the wedding stuff. I was wrong. So wrong. A few weeks after Jess's engagement, she and Blake came over to our house. Nothing fancy, just a casual visit. We're all sitting in the living room chatting about our wedding plans, and then it happens. The money talk. It always happens, doesn't it? Rick had been pretty quiet during most of the conversation, but when Jess asked about what he could contribute, he perked up a bit. He told her that he could put in about $10,000 towards the wedding. Now, to me, that sounded pretty damn generous, considering everything. But Jess's face? Oh man, it was like someone had told her she was getting socks for Christmas. Total disappointment. She didn't say anything right away, but you could see the gears turning in her head. I didn't say anything either, because, well, I didn't want to make things worse. Blake just sat there like a statue, not getting involved as usual. Classic Blake. Jess finally spoke up, asking, "Is that it? I was hoping for a bit more." Rick kind of looked uncomfortable, but he stayed calm and explained, "Jess, I'd love to give you more, but that's what I can manage right now." I should probably explain why $10K is already more than enough. See, before Rick's wife passed, they went through hell with medical bills. Cancer treatments, hospital stays, and everything else drained every penny they had. Rick had to cash out his retirement, sell some investments, and even take out a second mortgage on his house just to cover it all. He basically sacrificed his entire financial future to take care of his wife in her final years. And after she passed, it left him in a tough spot. Not to mention, he quit his higher-paying job for something that gave him more flexibility. But it didn't pay nearly as much. So that $10K? Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. Anyway, after Rick explains himself, Jess doesn't look any happier. She presses him a bit more, but he stands firm. $10K is what he can give, and that's it. She sighs, clearly not happy. And then Rick says he's going to run out for a bit to grab something from the store. So it's just me, Jess, and Blake sitting in awkward silence. That's when Jess turns to me and says, "So, are you going to pitch in any more for the wedding? I mean, you're married to my dad now, right?" The way she said it, I can't even explain it. It wasn't just a question. It was like she was daring me to say no. Like she already had some nasty assumption about me and was waiting for confirmation. I didn't want to get into a whole thing with her, so I just told her, "Rick and I talked about it, and $10K is what we agreed on. That's what we can give together." Jess rolled her eyes and said, "I should have known. You're just here for what he has, not what you can give." I can't even begin to describe how pissed off that made me. Like, seriously? I've been putting up with her coldness for years, and now she has the nerve to accuse me of marrying her dad for money? I don't know what came over me, but I snapped. "Excuse me?" I said, trying not to raise my voice. "Who do you think has been paying off that second mortgage your dad took out? Who do you think is keeping this house afloat?" She looked confused for a second, but I wasn't done. "Your dad lost most of his savings taking care of your mom, and ever since we got married, I've been covering 70% of the bills. So no, I'm not a gold digger. I make more than your dad, and I've been the one helping him get back on his feet." Jess didn't even know what to say. She just kind of stared at me, probably trying to figure out if I was serious. Then, without another word, she stands up, calls me stuck up, and storms out of the house. Blake, like usual, stayed quiet, then awkwardly followed her out, not saying a single word. And that was that. Jess left, pissed off, and now I'm sitting here wondering if I went too far. But honestly, what was I supposed to do? Just sit there and let her call me a gold digger? I know things are probably going to get even messier now, but I'm done pretending like I don't exist in this family. If they want to think the worst of me, fine. but they should at least know the truth first. Alright, so here's where things start to get messy. After Jess stormed out and Blake followed her, I was left sitting there in total disbelief. Like, did that really just happen? I knew things weren't exactly warm and fuzzy between me and Rick's kids, but for Jess to straight up accuse me of being with her dad for his money, that was a new low, even for her. I sat there for a few minutes, just replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out if there was something I said or did that could have triggered her to act like that. Spoiler, there wasn't. So Rick gets home not too long after, and of course, the first thing he notices is that Jess and Blake are gone. I wasn't exactly ready to tell him about the whole fight just yet, so I brushed it off with something like, "Oh, they had to go." Rick didn't really push for details, which I was thankful for at that moment because I wasn't ready to get into it right away, but I knew I couldn't keep it from him forever. The next day, I get a text from Jess. It was one of those passive-aggressive, "I need to talk to my dad without you around" type messages, and honestly, it took everything in me not to respond with some smart comment. Instead, I told Rick that Jess wanted to talk to him, and he, being the good dad that he is, said he'd reach out and see what's going on. Later that evening, Rick gives her a call, and I'm just sitting in the other room pretending not to listen while also absolutely listening to every word. I couldn't hear what Jess was saying on her end, but from Rick's responses, I could tell she was definitely twisting the story. At one point, Rick says, "She said what?" And I could feel my stomach drop. Jess had clearly taken what I said about me helping out financially and twisted it into some wild accusation about me blaming her mom's illness for her not getting a better wedding budget. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that I felt like my head was about to explode from frustration. Rick hung up the phone, and I knew I had to come clean about the fight before Jess's version of events took over. So I sit him down and walk him through exactly what happened, how Jess accused me of being a gold digger, how I lost my temper and told her the truth about who's really been paying the bills, and how she stormed out after calling me stuck up. To my surprise, Rick wasn't mad. Well, not at me at least. He was pissed at Jess for what she said and how she handled the whole thing, but I could tell he was also uncomfortable with the fact that I had shared details about his financial situation with his kids. And I get it, I really do. I probably shouldn't have said anything in the heat of the moment, but what was I supposed to do? Just let her keep throwing those nasty accusations at me? Rick, being the calm and level-headed guy he is, said he'd talked to Jess and Blake, but he also gently told me that he didn't want his kids knowing all the details about his finances. He's always been pretty private about money, and I can respect that. But at the same time, I felt like they needed to know the truth, especially if they were going to sit there and act like I'm just mooching off their dad. Anyway, a few days go by, and I don't hear anything from Jess or Blake. It was kind of a relief, to be honest. The tension in the house had been sky high since the whole argument, and I was just trying to get back to some sense of normalcy. Rick and I went about our routine and things were fine between us, but I could tell he was still bothered by the situation with his kids. He wasn't saying much about it, but I could see it weighing on him. And of course, I felt guilty for putting him in that position, even though I knew I was only defending myself. Then, one afternoon, Rick gets another call from Jess. This time, she doesn't even wait for him to reach out first. She just calls out of nowhere. Again, I'm sitting in the other room, pretending not to listen while very much listening. And once again, I hear Rick saying stuff like, "That's not what she said," and "You need to stop twisting things." After the call, Rick came to me, clearly frustrated. Apparently, Jess had convinced herself that I somehow blamed her mom's illness for the fact that her wedding budget wasn't bigger. It's like she took one part of what I said, about how Rick had drained his savings during her mom's illness, and twisted it into me saying her mom's death was the reason for everything. I mean, who even thinks like that? Rick assured me that he told Jess she was overreacting and that I didn't say anything like that, but he also asked me to be a little more careful with what I say around his kids. He wasn't mad at me, but I could tell he didn't want things to escalate any further. At this point, I was just done. Done with the drama, done with the accusations, and done with trying to make things right with Jess and Blake. If they were going to keep coming at me like this, then I didn't see the point in bending over backward to make them like me. I wasn't the enemy here. I'd been nothing but supportive of Rick, and they were acting like I was some kind of villain in their story. It was exhausting. But of course, things didn't end there. They never do, right? A few days later, Rick comes to me and says that Jess is still upset and that she's now telling people I'm trying to take over the family finances. I swear, it was like every time we thought we were done with this mess, something new would pop up. I wasn't even sure how to react at this point. I mean, how do you respond when someone's just determined to see you as the bad guy, no matter what you do? Rick, to his credit, defended me again. He told Jess that I wasn't trying to take over anything and that I'd actually been the one helping him rebuild after everything that happened. But I could tell it was starting to wear on him too. No one wants to be stuck in the middle between their wife and their kids, and I felt bad for Rick, but I also didn't know what else to do. At this point, it felt like a lose-lose situation. I wasn't about to back down and let Jess continue thinking I was some gold digger, but I also didn't want to keep putting Rick in this uncomfortable spot. It was like no matter what I did, things were only going to get worse. So yeah, that's where we were. Me, stuck in this weird battle with my husband's kids, trying to navigate this mess without making things worse for Rick. It wasn't exactly what I had imagined when I married him, but here we were. So, after the whole mess with Jess and her ridiculous accusations, I thought things might cool down for a bit, but nope, it got worse. And when I say worse, I mean the kind of worse where you just want to throw your hands up and be like, what did I do to deserve this? But of course, I had to keep my cool, because if I didn't, I'd be the bad guy again. So here's how it goes down. A few days after Rick tells me that Jess is still running her mouth about me, I get a text from Blake. Now, Blake's always been the quieter one between him and Jess, so I wasn't really expecting much from him. But this text? It was long and full of a lot of passive-aggressive nonsense. He basically said something like, I don't want to get involved, but I think you've been out of line with my sister. Out of line? Really? He didn't even mention the fact that Jess was the one who came at me, calling me a gold digger. Instead, he's just parroting her version of events, saying I should have never brought up money or air their dad's financial struggles. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about the wedding budget or me being out of line. This was about control. Jess and Blake had always been used to their dad handling things their way. They'd never had to face the reality of how much Rick had sacrificed for them and their mom. And now that I was in the picture, and the truth was starting to come out, they didn't like it one bit. I was furious, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised. I knew Rick had shielded them from a lot over the years. He never wanted them to feel burdened by his struggles. But come on, at some point, they needed to grow up and face the facts. The world doesn't revolve around them and their wedding plans. So, I showed Rick the text from Blake. I expected him to be upset, maybe even confront Blake about it. But instead, he just sighed and said, they'll come around. And I just stood there, trying to figure out how he could be so calm about all of this when I was boiling inside. Like, sure, they're his kids, but at what point do you say enough is enough? Rick, being the ever-patient dad, decided he'd talk to them both. He sat down with Jess and Blake separately, trying to explain to them that I wasn't some gold digger, that I was actually the one who had been supporting the household financially, and that they needed to stop making me the bad guy. But instead of owning up to their behavior, Jess doubled down, saying something along the lines of, it's not about the money, it's about her attitude. Her attitude? Right, because the only thing I ever did wrong was stand up for myself when she insulted me. Blake wasn't any better. He said he didn't want to take sides, but it was clear whose side he was already on. He didn't care about the truth. He just wanted everything to go back to the way it was before I came into the picture. You know, where they had their dad all to themselves and no one was calling them out on their selfishness. After Rick's attempts to smooth things over failed miserably, I decided I was done playing nice. I wasn't going to let them keep dragging my name through the mud without defending myself. So the next time Jess came over, which was, by the way, to talk more about her wedding budget, I sat her down for a real conversation. Look, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could manage, I'm not here to fight with you, but you need to understand something. Your dad gave you $10K because that's what he can afford. He's not some secret millionaire hiding piles of cash. He's been working his butt off to rebuild after everything that happened with your mom. She just crossed her arms and looked at me like I was speaking another language. I don't care about the money, she said. I care about how you're treating my dad. That was it. That was the moment I realized Jess wasn't going to listen to a word I said. She wasn't even open to hearing the truth about anything. It was all about her perception, and nothing I said would change that. So I laid it out for her. I told her how I'd been the one paying the majority of the bills since Rick and I got married. How I wasn't some trophy wife living off her dad's money. I wasn't even doing it to make her feel guilty. I just wanted her to understand the reality of the situation. But of course, she didn't. Instead, she got even more defensive, saying, it's not your place to tell me how my dad's been handling his money. And yeah, maybe she had a point. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. But I was sick of being painted as the villain in this story. When she finally left, I felt like I'd just gone 10 rounds in a boxing match. And to make it worse, Rick wasn't exactly thrilled with how things went down either. He understood where I was coming from, but he still didn't like that I'd confronted Jess so directly. He kept saying things like, "They'll come around eventually," but I wasn't buying it. How many times do you have to let someone disrespect you before you stand up for yourself? The next few days were pretty tense. Rick tried to keep the peace, but it was clear that things were far from okay. Jess and Blake were still talking behind my back, and Rick was still caught in the middle, trying to make everyone happy. It was like we were all just waiting for the next explosion. And then, right when I thought things couldn't get more ridiculous, Jess called Rick again. This time, she wasn't just upset about the money or my attitude. She'd apparently started telling people that I was trying to take control of Rick's finances, like I had some grand plan to manipulate him and take over his life. It was complete nonsense, but the fact that she was spreading these rumors was enough to make my blood boil. Rick, to his credit, shut it down immediately. He told Jess that what she was saying was completely untrue and that she needed to stop spreading lies, but the damage was already done. Jess had planted this seed of doubt, and now it felt like there was this unspoken tension between Rick and me, even though he said he believed me. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I was tired of defending myself, tired of trying to make peace with people who clearly didn't want anything to do with me. But the worst part? I felt like Rick was starting to get worn down by it all. He wasn't saying it outright, but I could see it in the way he avoided the topic. He didn't want to deal with it anymore, and honestly, neither did I. But something had to give. I just wasn't sure what. Update 1. So, after all the drama with Jess spreading lies and Blake sitting on the sidelines acting like Switzerland, I thought things were as bad as they could get. But of course they weren't. I guess I should have expected it by now. Whenever you think things can't get more complicated, they do. A few days after the last blow-up, Rick comes home looking more stressed than I've ever seen him. He didn't say anything at first, just kind of went about his business like he was trying to figure out how to start. I could tell something was bothering him, so I asked what was going on. Turns out, Jess had taken things up another level. She had gone and told their extended family, Rick's siblings, his parents, even some cousins, that I was trying to take over his finances and basically run his life. She'd spun this whole story about how I was controlling, manipulative, and how Rick wasn't really himself anymore since we got married. I mean, really? At this point, I wasn't even mad anymore. I was just exhausted. How many times can someone throw nonsense at you before it just starts to sound like white noise? But the problem was, it wasn't just noise to Rick's family. They believed her. Rick told me his mom had called him earlier that day, really upset, asking if he was okay and if he needed help. Apparently, she thought I had him trapped or something. And Rick's siblings? They were all blowing up his phone, saying things like, "We're worried about you, and why is she involved in your money?" It was ridiculous. None of them had ever even asked about our finances before. But suddenly, they were all experts on how we should be handling things. Rick was frustrated, I could tell. And the worst part? He was frustrated with me, too. Not because I'd actually done anything wrong, but because he felt stuck between his family and me. He didn't want to choose sides, but it was clear that his family was pushing him to. And Jess? She was just sitting back, probably loving the fact that she'd stirred up so much chaos. I told Rick I wasn't going to engage with his family about it. If they wanted to believe Jess's lies, then that was on them. I wasn't about to sit down and explain my entire marriage to them just to clear my name. But Rick? He wasn't so sure. He wanted me to talk to them, to set the record straight. And I get it. I really do. He wanted peace, but I wasn't about to go groveling to his family for their approval, especially not when Jess was the one causing all this mess in the first place. We went back and forth on it for a while. Rick kept saying things like, if they just understood the situation, they wouldn't be upset, and this is all a misunderstanding. But I wasn't buying it. Jess wasn't just misunderstanding things. She was purposely twisting the truth to make me look bad. And Rick's family? They were choosing to believe her without even giving me a chance to explain. Eventually, Rick agreed to leave it alone for now, but I could tell he wasn't happy about it. And honestly, neither was I. It felt like this big cloud hanging over us, just waiting to burst open at the worst possible moment. A couple of days later, Rick had to go out of town for work. Nothing too long, just a weekend trip, but it couldn't have come at a worse time. I was still fuming about the whole family situation, and now I had to deal with it alone while he was away. But whatever, I figured I'd just lay low and hope the weekend passed without any more drama. Of course, that didn't happen. The day Rick left, Jess showed up at the house. I didn't even know she was coming. One minute, I'm minding my own business, and the next, there she is, knocking on the door like she's here for some friendly chat. I opened the door, and she just walked right in like she owned the place. No hello, no nothing. She wasted no time either. The second she sat down, she went right into it. "We need to talk about my dad," she said. like she was about to drop some life-altering news. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting to see what new nonsense she was about to throw at me. She started going on about how Rick had never been the same since we got married, how he used to be more involved in the family before I came along, and how now everything was about me and my needs. And then she dropped the real kicker. I think you need to step back and let him reconnect with his family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Step back? From what? From my own marriage? It was like she thought I was some kind of invader in her dad's life. And if I just disappeared, everything would magically go back to the way it was before. I didn't lose my temper this time, though. I stayed calm, because I knew that's exactly what she wanted, for me to blow up and give her more ammunition. Instead, I told her, "Look, I'm not going anywhere. Your dad and I are married and we're a team. If you don't like that, that's your problem, not mine." She didn't like that. At all. Jess stood up and gave me this look like she was about to say something else, but instead she just turned and walked out of the house without another word. And honestly, I was glad she left, because I was about 5 seconds away from losing it. When Rick came back from his trip, I told him what had happened, and he just sighed like he was completely worn down by the whole thing. He didn't even seem surprised anymore, just tired. And to be fair, so was I. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I'd tried everything to keep the peace, to be civil, to give Jess and Blake the space they needed to adjust to our marriage. But it didn't matter. No matter what I did, they were always going to see me as the bad guy. Rick and I had a long talk that night, and I told him how frustrated I was with the whole situation. I wasn't asking him to pick sides, but I needed him to back me up more. I couldn't keep fighting this battle on my own while he stayed neutral. It wasn't fair to either of us, and to his credit, Rick agreed. He told me he was going to have another conversation with Jess, and this time, he wasn't going to hold back. He was going to make it clear that this behavior had to stop, or there were going to be consequences. I didn't know if it would work, but at least it was a start. At least Rick was finally seeing things from my side. Update 2. After that conversation with Rick, I thought things might actually start to change. I really did. I figured maybe, just maybe, he'd talk to Jess, lay down some boundaries, and we could finally get some peace. But of course, things didn't go the way I hoped. They never do they? A couple of days later, Rick sat down with Jess to have the talk. He'd told me he was going to be firm, that he wasn't going to let her walk all over us anymore. And honestly, I believed him. Rick's a good guy, but I knew this whole situation was wearing him down. He'd always tried to stay neutral, but at some point, you've got to take a stand, right? Well, after their talk, Rick came home and told me that things had gone okay, and I'll admit I wasn't exactly thrilled with the word okay. When I pressed him for more details, he just said Jess seemed to understand that she needed to back off, but she didn't really apologize for anything. I could tell he didn't want to get into it too much, so I let it go, for the moment at least. I figured we'd see how things played out. A week passed, and there was no word from Jess or Blake. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but honestly, the silence was nice for once. It felt like we were finally getting some breathing room. Rick and I even started to have some normal conversations again, without everything being about the kids and their drama. I started to think maybe this was the calm after the storm. But then, Jess called. Now, when I saw her name pop up on Rick's phone, I had that sinking feeling in my stomach like, here we go again. Rick answered, and I could hear Jess's voice on the other end, even though I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Okay, maybe I was a little. She wasn't yelling or anything, but the tone, it wasn't friendly. Rick kept saying things like, "We already talked about this," and "I thought we were past that." So I knew right away that this wasn't going to be a good conversation. I walked out of the room to give him some space, but I could feel the tension building. When he finally hung up, I asked him what happened, and the look on his face said it all. Apparently, Jess had decided that our last conversation wasn't enough for her. She told Rick that she still felt uncomfortable with me being involved in his finances, and that she wanted to have a meeting with both of us, like a formal sit-down, to discuss it. A meeting? I mean, are we running a business here, or are we just trying to live our lives? Rick looked exhausted, and honestly, so was I. I didn't want to have some kind of intervention with Jess where she'd just twist everything I said and make me out to be the bad guy again. But Rick, being Rick, thought maybe this could be a way to clear the air once and for all. He thought if we could all sit down and talk it out like adults, maybe things would finally get better. I wasn't convinced, but I agreed. What else was I going to do? It's not like we could avoid her forever. So we set up a time to meet at a neutral place, some diner where Rick and I used to go on weekends. I guess the idea was that it wouldn't feel so confrontational if we weren't sitting in our house with all the baggage that comes with it. The day of the meeting rolls around and I'm dreading it. Rick and I get there first, and I can tell he's nervous too. He's tapping his foot under the table, and every time the door opens, he glances over to see if it's Jess. I'm just sitting there, trying to mentally prepare for what I know is going to be a train wreck. Jess finally shows up, and to her credit, she's calm. No yelling, no accusations. At least not right away. She sits down, and we all order coffee like we're about to have some normal, pleasant conversation. But the second the waitress leaves, Jess dives right into it. I'm still not comfortable with the way things are, she says, not even bothering with any kind of small talk. I don't understand why you're letting her, she gestured at me, have control over everything. I wasn't going to let that slide, so I jumped in. I don't have control over everything, Jess. Your dad and I make decisions together. As a married couple, that's how it works. But she wasn't hearing it. It just feels like you've taken over his life. He used to be so independent, and now it's like he's different. The way she said different made it sound like I'd somehow brainwashed Rick into doing whatever I wanted, which honestly was insane. Rick tried to step in and defend me, but Jess wasn't listening. She kept going on about how things were better before I came into the picture, how Rick was more involved with the family, how she just wanted things to go back to how they were. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about control or finances or any of the stuff she'd been saying. Jess just didn't want me in the picture at all. I sat there trying to stay calm while she unloaded all this on us, but it was getting harder and harder. She wasn't just upset about how things were now. She was blaming me for everything that had changed since her mom passed. She wanted the old version of her dad back, the one who was struggling but still theirs, not the version who had moved on and built a new life with me. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to replace anyone, that I loved Rick and just wanted to support him. But Jess wasn't having it. She kept pushing, and at one point she even said, "Maybe you should take a step back and let Dad figure things out on his own for a while." That was it. That was my breaking point. "I'm not stepping back from my marriage, Jess," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Your dad and I are partners. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to let you keep treating me like an outsider just because you don't like that he's moved on." Rick looked at me, then at Jess, and I could see he was torn. But he didn't say anything. He just sat there, letting the silence hang between us. Jess finally stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "Well, I guess we're done here then." And just like that, she walked out. Rick and I sat there in silence for a few minutes, both of us processing what had just happened. It wasn't the resolution he'd been hoping for, but at least it was clear where we all stood. On the way home, Rick finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "I didn't realize how much this was hurting you." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We both knew things were far from over, but at least for now, the lines had been drawn, and I was done backing down.